When most car manufacturers in the early 1990s were trying to impress the world with increasingly powerful supercars and ever more aggressive styling, Franco Sbarro decided to go in a completely different direction. He did not simply want to create a fast car, he wanted to present an entirely new philosophy of automobile construction. The result of that vision was the Sbarro Helios, one of the most extraordinary concepts of its era. The car looked like a vehicle taken straight out of a science fiction movie. A massive, elongated body, upward opening doors, a futuristic silhouette, and a structure based on the patented dual-frame system made the Helios seem more like a technological experiment than an ordinary show car. At a time when Ferrari was developing the F40, Lamborghini was building the Diablo, and McLaren was only beginning work on the revolutionary F1. Franco Sbarro was presenting the world with a car intended to change the very idea of vehicle construction. The Helios was not just a supercar. It was a mobile laboratory, a manifesto of engineering courage, and a demonstration of how far a man without limits could go. Most importantly, it was not an empty prototype, without an interior or functioning mechanics. The Helios was a fully drivable automobile powered by a massive Jaguar V12 engine, equipped with a manual gearbox and technology that still feels futuristic today. To this day, it remains one of the most forgotten, yet simultaneously one of the most fascinating concept cars of the early 1990s. To understand where the Sbarro Helios came from, one must first understand Franco Sbarro himself. The Italian-born constructor had been operating in Switzerland since the 1970s and quickly earned a reputation as a man for whom nothing was impossible. Sbarro was not a traditional designer working for a major corporation. He was a visionary, an inventor, and an experimenter. He created replicas of legendary automobiles, built his own supercars, designed unusual off-road vehicles, and regularly surprised visitors at the Geneva Motor Show with increasingly outrageous ideas. In his world, a car did not have to obey established conventions. It could feature an unconventional seating arrangement, experimental suspension, or a completely new chassis design. Franco Sbarro also spent years developing his own technological patents. He began his career in the 1950s as a mechanic in Neuchâtel, Switzerland, and by 1951, he had already opened his own workshop. Later, he collaborated with George Filippinetti and the Scuderia Filippinetti racing team, where he gained experience as chief mechanic on racing cars. In 1968, he founded Atelier de Construction Automobile, and several years later, he also established the École Espera Sbarro School, which became the birthplace of many extraordinary prototypes and experimental projects. Franco Sbarro spent years developing his own technological patents. One of the most famous was the hubless wheel, which looked like something taken from a futuristic movie. The Helios, however, was meant to showcase something even more ambitious, a completely new method of constructing automobiles. Sbarro believed that the traditional structure of a car limited development and made it difficult to create lighter and more versatile vehicles. Therefore, at the end of the 1980s, he began work on a system called dual frame. It was this idea that became the foundation of the Helios project and ensured the car's place in automotive history as one of the most extraordinary technological concepts of its era. The most important element of the Sbarro Helios was its patented dual-frame construction. The name itself revealed the idea behind the project. Franco Sbarro wanted to completely separate the mechanical portion of the car from the bodywork. In practice, this meant creating two independent modules. The first consisted of the chassis containing the engine, suspension, drivetrain, and all the key mechanical systems. The second module was a lightweight body made from composite materials. The two sections were connected by 6 pneumatic actuators. This solution allowed not only the rapid separation of the body from the mechanical structure, but also the adjustment of ride height and suspension stiffness. As a result, the car could change its character depending on conditions. In theory, the Helios could be adapted both for high-speed track driving and comfortable travel on ordinary roads. Franco Sbarro believed that the future of motoring would be based on modular structures that would allow bodies to be exchanged easily and vehicles to be adapted for different purposes. Interestingly, the dual-frame concept was also intended to reduce the number of traditional mechanical components and lower the vehicle's overall weight. In practice, the Helios weighed around 1,600 kilograms, which was an impressive figure considering the large V12 engine and futuristic structure. Even today, the concept feels remarkably modern. The Sbarro Helios was unveiled at the Geneva Motor Show in 1991 and immediately became one of the biggest attractions of the entire event. Franco Sbarro's stand regularly drew crowds, but the Helios generated exceptional interest. The car looked like a machine from the future. The most characteristic feature was the long, extremely low silhouette of the blue coupe, with enormous upward-opening doors, resembling gull wings. Alongside the coupe, Sbarro also displayed a white convertible equipped with a removable transparent roof made of plastic materials. Additionally, Sbarro prepared a bare chassis and a raw composite body, so visitors could clearly see how the dual-frame system worked. Interestingly, the entire Sbarro stand at the Geneva show was financed by Agip Suisse and designed by the renowned architect Mario Botta, further emphasizing the prestige and uniqueness of the project. It was an incredibly bold approach because most manufacturers only displayed finished cars, whereas Sbarro wanted to showcase the technology itself. That was exactly what made the Helios stand out among other concept cars. It was not merely a spectacular sculpture on wheels, it was a demonstration of a new philosophy of automotive engineering. At a time when the automotive industry still relied largely on conventional construction methods, the Helios looked like an experiment from the next century. Many journalists and visitors could hardly believe that such a futuristic project had been created by a small independent constructor operating outside the world of major corporations. Beneath the futuristic bodywork of the Sbarro Helios was a very serious and highly prestigious engine. Franco Sbarro chose to use Jaguar's V12 power unit with a displacement of 5.3 liters. The engine was mounted transversely in the middle, behind the passenger cabin, which further emphasized the exotic character of the automobile. In the early 1990s, a V12 engine was still considered the ultimate symbol of luxury, prestige, and high performance. The Jaguar unit produced around 350 horsepower, which, combined with the car's relatively low weight, allowed for very respectable performance. The engine was paired with a 5-speed manual gearbox, adding a more sporting character to the Helios. Interestingly, Franco Sbarro did not attempt to create his own engine from scratch. Instead, he used a proven and highly respected unit from a renowned manufacturer, while focusing his experimentation on the chassis and body construction. As a result, the car was not merely a futuristic prototype, but also a fully functioning automobile capable of being driven on public roads. The mid-mounted engine layout made the Helios resemble exotic supercars from Ferrari or Lamborghini. However, its construction and appearance were significantly bolder than most of its Italian rivals. The styling of the Sbarro Helios was one of the most shocking aspects of the entire project. Franco Sbarro was never afraid of controversial forms, and once again, he decided to create something absolutely unique. The blue coupe featured dramatically elongated proportions, a very low roofline, and sharp futuristic shapes characteristic of late 1980s and early 1990s visions of the future. The most striking feature, however, was the upward opening doors. These were not classic gull-wing doors like those of the Mercedes-Benz 300 SL, but rather a more theatrical interpretation of a futuristic supercar. The Helios looked like a vehicle designed for a science fiction film. The white convertible was slightly more elegant, yet still incredibly daring stylistically. Its transparent, removable roof gave it an almost cosmic appearance. It is worth remembering that many manufacturers at the time were experimenting with aerodynamic forms, but most concept cars remained relatively conservative. Sbarro went much further. The Helios did not attempt to look like a production car. It was meant to shock and attract attention, and it accomplished that perfectly. Even today, more than 30 years after its debut, its silhouette still appears incredibly modern and surreal. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Helios project was its modularity. Franco Sbarro did not simply create a single show car. He developed an entire demonstration program consisting of several different elements. There was the blue coupe, the white convertible, a complete rolling chassis, and a raw composite body shell. All of this was intended to demonstrate the capabilities of the dual-frame system. Such a presentation format was extremely unusual. Most manufacturers focused on a finished automobile, whereas Sbarro wanted to reveal the entire philosophy behind the project. By separating the body from the mechanical structure, it became possible to create multiple versions of the car using the same chassis. In theory, this offered enormous flexibility and the ability to develop new variants rapidly. One could say that Sbarro anticipated the modern concept of modular platforms, which today are standard throughout the automotive industry. Of course, the dual frame was a far more radical and experimental solution. In practice, it never entered mass production, but the idea itself was deeply impressive. The Helios was therefore not merely a spectacular concept car, but also an attempt to change the way people thought about automobile construction. The interior of the Sbarro Helios also reflected the futuristic nature of the project. Although it retained certain elements typical of early 1990s supercars, the overall design resembled the cockpit of a concept vehicle far more than the cabin of a conventional road car. Sbarro paid enormous attention to detail and ergonomics. The cabin was intended to be modern, minimalist, and functional. A wide center console, futuristic gauges, and a low window line created an atmosphere reminiscent of an aircraft or spacecraft. The car was designed to give the driver the feeling of participating in a technological experiment. At the same time, the Helios was not a stripped-out prototype devoid of comfort. The interior was finished with high-quality materials, and the overall impression was one of luxury. It is important to remember that Franco Sbarro often combined wild technical ideas with extremely elegant craftsmanship. Thanks to this, his vehicles never looked like amateur garage projects, but rather like fully realized concept cars ready for display at the world's greatest motor shows. The Helios was a perfect example of this philosophy. Even if serial production was never planned, the car was intended to demonstrate the highest level of creativity and engineering skill. The enormous interest surrounding the Sbarro Helios after its Geneva debut quickly turned the project into one of Franco Sbarro's most recognizable creations. Particular attention was drawn to the white convertible. Shortly after the premiere, it was purchased by Friedi Leinhard, a Swiss racing driver and founder of the office furniture company Lista Office. Leinhard was a passionate automotive enthusiast and collector of unusual vehicles. Over time, he acquired the entire Helios program and used it during various exhibitions and automotive events. Thanks to him, the project survived and was not dismantled or destroyed like many other prototypes from that era. Interestingly, the Helios also appeared in Jeremy Clarkson's Motor World in the mid-1990s, which further increased its recognition among car enthusiasts. The car became a symbol of Franco Sbarro's wild creativity and one of the most distinctive concepts presented in Geneva during the early 1990s. Today, the prototype resides in the Autobau Exhibition Center in Romanshorn, Switzerland, where it can still be admired alongside other remarkable vehicles from Friedi Leinhard's collection. In terms of performance, the Sbarro Helios was never intended to compete directly with the most extreme supercars in the world. Franco Sbarro was more interested in innovation than in chasing speed records. Nevertheless, the car's specifications were highly impressive for a prototype built by a small independent company. The Jaguar V12 engine, producing around 350 horsepower, provided strong performance, while the weight of approximately 1,600 kilograms allowed the car to achieve capabilities comparable to many sports cars of the early 1990s. The mid-mounted engine and relatively low mass promised good weight distribution and potentially excellent handling characteristics. However, it is important to remember that the Helios was primarily a technological laboratory. Its main purpose was to demonstrate the possibilities of the dual-frame system and present a new vision of automotive construction. As a result, Franco Sbarro focused more on experimentation with chassis and structure than on setting records at racetracks. The mere fact that the car was fully functional and drivable was deeply impressive. Many concept cars from that period were merely static mock-ups without working mechanical systems. The Helios was something far more advanced. Production of the Sbarro Helios was extremely limited, which today gives the project an almost mythical status. According to available information, 1 white convertible, 1 blue coupe, 1 rolling demonstration chassis, and 1 raw composite body shell were built. Altogether, the entire program therefore consisted of only 4 major structural elements. This was not serial production even by the standards of the most exotic automobiles. The Helios was an experimental project, created to showcase technology and demonstrate Franco Sbarro's capabilities. That is exactly why it is so extraordinarily rare today. Unlike many limited production supercars, there is no group of several or several dozen examples scattered around the world. The Helios practically does not exist on the collector market. Most people know it only from photographs and archival footage from the Geneva Motor Show. This has elevated the car to legendary status among enthusiasts of automotive concept cars. Many collectors today consider Franco Sbarro's projects among the most creative and daring experiments of the late 20th century. The Helios occupies a special place in that history because it was not only visually spectacular, but also a carrier of groundbreaking technology. The value of the Sbarro Helios today is practically impossible to determine precisely. The car has never appeared at a traditional collector auction, and its unique status makes comparisons with any other automobile extremely difficult. However, it can be assumed that if any of the examples were offered for sale today, the price would be enormous. Considering the uniqueness of the project, Franco Sbarro's importance in automotive history, the presence of a Jaguar V12 engine, and the absolutely exceptional dual-frame construction, the value of the Helios today could range from around 1 million to several million euros. In the case of a well-documented example presented at a prestigious auction, the price could rise even higher. The collector market increasingly appreciates unusual concept cars from the 1980s and 1990s, especially those representing bold technological experiments. The Helios fits perfectly into this trend. It is not merely a beautiful automobile. It is a symbol of an era when independent constructors could still shock the world with their own visions of the future. It is precisely this uniqueness that would make the Helios an invaluable work of automotive art for many collectors today. The Sbarro Helios perfectly demonstrates what an extraordinary creator Franco Sbarro truly was. In a world dominated by giant corporations and enormous budgets, he was capable of independently building cars more futuristic and daring than many projects from the world's largest manufacturers. The Helios was not Sbarro's only wild creation, but it summarized his philosophy perfectly. For Franco Sbarro, a car was meant to be more than transportation. It was meant to be an experiment, a manifesto of creativity, and a testing ground for new technologies. That is why his projects were often ahead of their time, and sometimes too radical ever to enter mass production. Yet this is exactly what makes them so fascinating today. Modern motoring is increasingly becoming predictable and driven by economics. Projects like the Helios remind us of an era when constructors could still allow themselves genuine madness. Franco Sbarro proved that even a small company could create a vehicle capable of attracting worldwide attention and remaining memorable for decades. Today, the Sbarro Helios remains one of the most extraordinary and underrated concept cars of the early 1990s. It was futuristic, daring, and completely detached from conventional automotive design principles. It combined a powerful Jaguar V12 engine, the experimental dual-frame structure, dramatic styling, and a vision of the future of motoring. Although it never entered series production, its significance extends far beyond that of an ordinary show car. The Helios was proof that the automotive world could be a field of unlimited creativity. Franco Sbarro created a machine that resembled a science fiction prototype, far more than a conventional supercar, and yet the project was fully functional and technically advanced. Today, more than 30 years after its debut, the Helios still looks futuristic and still has the power to shock. That is precisely why it remains such an important part of automotive history. Not because it achieved commercial success or set speed records, but because it dared to be completely different. In a world full of supercars that all looked increasingly alike, the Sbarro Helios was a true outsider, a cosmic experiment that still reminds us today how wild and creative the automotive industry of the 1990s could be.